on this computer. All right, so let's start. So answering your question, firstly, welcome everyone to the first Eco Chatter. And this will be one of many because there's so many things that we can discuss and should discuss because we don't have to go through this on our own. I know a lot of us are already making changes in how we eat, how we wash our hair, all the different changes, but we don't have to do it alone. We can actually help each other, give tips and solutions, give suggestions, say what works, what doesn't work. I'm sure you guys remember the post about menstruation and what we use. That's one of the things, because then we divert some of those things out of the ecosystems so that it doesn't land up in a landfill or even in the ocean. So what we're going to do is today is going to be a little bit more of an introduction, but we will be briefly talking about our role in ecosystems as humans. Because if you look at an ecosystem, then each player within, it's a closed system, and each player, whether it's a lion, a bee, an earthworm, they all play a role, and it's interconnected. And if you think about the fungi and the mycelium that connects things, lichen on rocks and on trees, there's an interplay. And somehow we have forgotten that we should be giving as well as taking. Because we've been extracting. We're extracting food, minerals, a lot of things that we need, but we forget to replenish. So our biggest role, in my opinion, but we'll have a discussion about it later in a few minutes, our biggest role is to now regenerate, restore. Because when we do that, that will start to support us anyway, but in a much more sustainable and regenerative way, where everything we use, whatever we don't use, we put back, whether it's into the soil, into the system, into our human networks, putting it back so that that then again supports and is the food for the next things to grow. So we'll chat a little bit about food forests, which is one of the ways to restore, regenerate, and also make food for ourselves, and to create food security, which is something that's going to be very important going forward as weather change, as our system, our current financial system changes, where, I mean, at the moment, we are so used to the food is grown thousands of kilometers away. It gets harvested, put into huge warehouses, put on a truck, taken to a supermarket close to you, and you get that food by giving money. So we're quite disconnected from the actual food and the soil in which it's grown, or if it's animals, how they are caught, how they are killed. We have no idea most of the time. And we need to, one of the things that we're starting to now do everywhere, I'm seeing it happen everywhere, is we connecting ourselves to the soil, to the animals, to the ecosystems again, so that we are integrally part of it. So as we go forward and as the changes start to happen, we need to, I mean, this is what true ecosystem is about, connecting each other so that we can support and help each other to go through the changes, to make things sustainable, to support ourselves and each other in everything we need, whether it's food, clean water. It's actually unmute yourselves and let's have a look at what is our basic needs actually as humans. What is the things we actually need? So I've mentioned food and water.
Shelter of some description.
Say again?
Sorry.
Oh, shelter.
Shelter, yeah.
Yes.
I guess that's clothing too.
Yeah, transport on some level.
And the transport, would it be, I mean, this is one of the things we're starting to now think. How far do we need to be transported?
What's the purpose of transport?
Yeah. Because at the moment, a lot of our transport is to get our food to us, to get our clothes to us, to get the things we want to use to us. But if we can source it from our local neighborhood, from our local networks, then it's not really that necessary. So then you're looking more about transporting your own body to where you want to be, if it is needed. But I mean, there is a lot of travel. But I mean, Natalie has mentioned how that we will start to travel more and move around. And I've always wondered why we have borders. It doesn't really make sense. Like, why would you? And that's one of the biggest challenges, especially in Africa, is before colonization happened and before Europeans and, yeah, I suppose Europeans and the Portuguese came in and put up borders and created countries. The people, the tribes, they could move when the rains change. They could go where the herds are moving to. They adapted with the weather and with the changing environment. It also allowed not just the humans moving, but the herds allowed the plants in the fields to grow again, because they move away, it sits there, and then when they come back, it's all regenerated again. But with borders, you're a refugee if in your own country you have war, if you have sudden weather changes. Trying to think now with which country it was. I think it's the Maasai, who are really struggling. Their cattle are dying. And if they don't use money as we do. So if you don't have cattle, you don't have food, you don't have a way to trade, that is your livelihood. There are some of them who are carrying their cattle too far to the water that is still there. Before we had borders, they wouldn't have to do that. They would have moved to where the water and the rains are going. Of course, things are a little bit more hectic now with climate change, so the weather changes are bigger. So it is harder for wild animals as well to adapt, which is also where I think our role comes in, because we can support. I understand completely and I mean, we can't not accept, and it's very sad, but accept that there are some species who are not going to make it. They are checking out. And you can say it's stronger survive, or you can accept that just as our souls have come to the planet now for the shift and for the ascension, so too some animals are here to teach us certain lessons. They are here because they want to be. Some of them are said also to be multidimensional beings who are not even, I don't know how to, I'm still getting my head around it, but that they're not necessarily just earth beings. They are from another realm, and they just here as messengers and also to experience this world, just like we are. So there's a certain type of acceptance on certain species will and are already going extinct. Hello. Welcome. So certain species will go extinct, but there are so many animals that we can help for them to adapt with us, so that we can learn and collaborate with them too. Because I think for a long time we've seen ourselves here, and the animal kingdom there, and the plant kingdom there, and the rocks and the mountains there, and we've literally made all these little boxes and categories that are separate from us, because then we can use them just as we want to. So our role is about being a custodian who regenerates and restores, but also say to them, okay, come here. How can we collaborate? How can we support each other? And if we need to support you first, so you can then support us, let's do it. There's, I should have actually checked who it was, but there is an amazing story about this boy who went into manhood, and before he could do the what do you call it, the ceremony for him to go from boyhood to manhood, he had to hunt for his first kill, and that took him through an entire journey. And he then understood how the hunter and the hunted, there's a dance, and it's a spiral dance. And I've read this in other places as well. And they have this agreement that literally, it doesn't happen here where they are running behind each other. It happens above, their higher selves communicating with each other. And there's a contract or an agreement where the hunted offers their spirit or their body as a gift to the hunter to nourish their body, and then they become part of the entire beautiful system again. And the beautiful system I'm talking about is the ecosystem and these natural environments where everything is recycled. We come in and we bring in human-made things like plastic that breaks down, but it can't really be recycled by all the organisms. There are some organisms that can use oil or that can eat it and transform it. And some of them have adapted to be able to do it, but there's still quite few species who can. So of course there is hectic, awful circumstances or results from our pollution. And that's one of the things we need to start going back into and say, okay, let's go clean up so that we can help these systems to regenerate as much as it can within our changing environment. So that was now a very long side note there, because so that was basically about our role. Do any of you maybe have something you want to add to what our roles as custodians are?
Oh, okay. Well, I was going to say, talking about like what our needs are, and I think kind of ties into our roles as well. Like as physical beings, we need physical connection as well as energetic and spiritual connection and etheric connection. That physical connection, I think, is really important, and that then comes into play with this role of being physical custodians of the land. Like I've just had a day of getting out into the streets and standing up to ask and demand change around how we're treating that land at the moment. But just to kind of touch on and add to what you were saying about boundaries, like I'm quite big on physical boundaries, and I think maybe too much so sometimes, but when you were talking about crossing borders, it's like, I think, you know, we have physical borders, we have physical bodies that are very real, and they're very separate and, you know, distinctly different to our energetic borders and boundaries, which are perhaps more fluid and more open. And, you know, this is bringing down 5D energy into the 3D, into the physical, and really starting to concrete these physical aspects of what we are observing and experiencing. And it's, you know, I don't know the answer to this at all either, but it's like we are just becoming more adaptive and responsive to what we are presented with, and coming at it from a more compassionate point of view, like you were talking about. People dying or going hungry because they're not allowed to cross borders. It's like we actually can be letting these things in and just allowing things to come into our world, into our borders. And when you're talking about refugees as a result of climate change and people saying, oh, no, you can't come into our country, our borders are closed, like that's fucked. We can have, I think borders are, I agree, like passport control, border control is stupid. Like it's so ridiculous. When you're talking about shutting people out when they're in need, that's a different story altogether. We're becoming very closed, and potentially we need to just continue to open up and see what are the needs of others whilst still maintaining our own borders in some way.
Yeah, I think the helpful borders or boundaries are perhaps going to become smaller as a town kind of relies on themselves for food production. I see that in a town, and I've got a little presentation that we'll look at, a very short, simple little thing. Right at the end, it's an infographic about how our towns can become more resilient, more adaptive. And the reason I mentioned that, the woman who has created the graphic, she is literally bringing in changes in a town called Knysna in South Africa. So she works with the municipality, she works with the community, she works with everyone. And one of the things that we are doing, it's not, well, Knysna and Sedgefield. In Sedgefield specifically, we have, if you can't do compost at your home, you bring compost to a central spot. You bring your food scraps to the central spot, and then they do the compost, and then you can come and you fetch your compost there. So the same amount of food scraps you brought, that's the amount of compost you can take back home. So those type of things. So the boundaries would be around that community, the town, in a sense. Towns in South Africa is very far apart anyway. Dirty.
I also saw, the Inner Worlds, Outer Worlds video that you posted, the YouTube one, part 4, about the brain being one of the senses. The hunter and the hunted information was given in one of those videos as well. It was a lion and a gazelle. So
yes.
Look at, I don't remember which part it was, but it was one of the 4 parts. The other thing was I watched the movie 2040 the other night, which has just been released here, made by an Australian man for his 4-year-old daughter, looking at the year 2040 and what we can do now with things that already exist to make things more sustainable in 20 years. But what this was about was connected to both the food and transport you spoke about before, where he gave information where the statistic, I don't remember exactly what it was either Norway or Finland, somewhere like that. They actually export the same amount of live fish, like fish, caught fish, to another country to fillet it, and then it comes back again to that same country again to be sold. So they're selling it, having it processed, and buying it back again. And it was like 1.3 billion or million something or others, but it was more or less the same going in both directions. So there's all that transport that's happening.
It's happening in a lot of places with a lot of things.
The processing was halfway across the world and back again.
Yeah.
They said this it's been the same thing about using transport for Australian trees, sending it to Japan for paper and then bringing it back again, buying it back. And these trees are old log, like old growth forests. They're being sent off literally to be wood chipped and turned into paper, and then possibly sold back to us or sold elsewhere. So it's the same garbage. It's the same crazy economic story that, doesn't necessarily serve anything except, a corporation and making money. There's no real purpose to any of it.
Yeah, exactly. South Africa does the same with steel, iron, same thing.
Yeah, we do too now as well. It's all mined here, shipped offshore to China, and then sold back to us. in inferior products as well, which is the irony of this crazy thing. So
yeah. So so I want to move on a little bit from just simply our role, which is anyway something that we will keep talking about, because although we need to step away a little bit sometimes from our thinking minds, we do constantly think about what it is that we should be doing, because we need to create new things. We need to create new ways of being, of doing, so that we don't keep supporting crazy things like buying paper that was, the trees were felled here, taken away, brought back. So we don't support that. I mean, what about making our own paper, or supporting a small business who are making paper close to you? That type of, so diverting our energy into the things we want to see more of, because there are incredible projects happening all over the earth, and I'm sure almost every country on this earth. Projects that are cleaning our ocean waste, projects that are harvesting. So one of the things we're going to chat about is, or I'll just show examples of fog collectors. So in places where there's not a lot of rain, you can harvest water from the fog. And that's something that came out of biomimicry, where you use nature really as a teacher, looking at how animals, at how plants are being able to so effectively use energy. So a lot of different projects happening, a lot of amazing things. Tree Sisters, who are planting trees. There are organizations who are teaching women skills development projects for previously disadvantaged communities. I mean, in South Africa, there's a lot of that happening. And it's so easy to look at all the bad things happening, and how that our government has stayed stuck in the same paradigms and the same programs and patterns that our previous government has. Because I'm sure you guys know about 1994, apartheid before then, and then we have true democracy after 1994. But it seems like our current government is just repeating some of the mistakes. And then people get stuck in that, and they don't see how many solutions there are, how much love there is around us, how much projects that are really making a difference. And that is specifically so with the environmental projects as well. There are countless food forests, permaculture gardens that are being built. But of course, we don't see that in the news. We don't see it in magazines, unless you, of course, subscribing to the right channels, buying the right magazines. But then again, why do we need to buy magazines? Like, we really don't need to buy more things. And it's also what I found is buying things to entertain myself, magazines, or, I mean, even though it gives me information, like it sometimes disconnects you or gives an excuse not to go to a garden, to go and see how they do it and learn from people, and go to a workshop, go and learn from other people. So I think that there's a real need for us to physically, and we've been speaking about this, physically getting together to learn, and physically getting together to plant trees. So I want us to have a quick look at food security and water. Not a quick look, I mean an actual look. Because this is one of the things that when I asked in the poll what you guys wanted to speak about, this was a big one. Because this is how we sustain ourselves. Our physical bodies need nourishment. So we need to make sure that we've got food and water in the most sustainable way possible. So I'd like you to all unmute yourself so that we can actually have a discussion about this. Because we all have knowledge about it. We all have seen some things or have some idea of how we can do this for ourselves. Whether it's a balcony garden, whether it's an actual permaculture, beautiful big garden, or whether it's about collaborating with others who do have a garden or access to soil, access to real, beautiful, fertile space. So I know, Charlotte, your hands are in the soil.
Sometimes. We did have a nice morning yesterday. Was it yesterday? Where Priscilla and I got our hands in the dirt here and planted some things. And I think whenever, like, I've done a lot of work. I used to volunteer with the Youth Food Movement, which is all around connecting young people with the source of their food. So it's all the stuff that we're talking about. I was a volunteer with them for just over a year. And it's actually really hard to produce more than 60 or 70% of your own food. Like, that's kind of the sweet spot of what you can realistically produce of your own. And it is a transition. Like, it's slowly just bringing in little practices and little techniques and different ways of, you know, producing your own food. If you have a balcony, setting up a couple of little boxes, or, you know, over in Scandinavia, and Scandinavian countries are all over this shit, hey, like, they are amazing. Some of the, like, I don't know if anyone has seen the neighborhoods where each garden will have a particular crop that they will produce and they all share. So it's kind of just doing, everyone's situation is so unique. It's doing what you're able to within your own little community, because it's such a physical thing. Like, you know, it'd be quite tricky for us to send food. We totally could for us to send food to Jodie or to Natalie, but it doesn't feel really connected to me. Like, that's still, there's a whole lot of food miles in that. And, you know, this concept of food mile, like, how far is your food traveling from the ground to the plate,
from its source?
Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of just looking at, what have you got right now that you can employ? How much space do you have? How big is your community that you can trade with? And is there a community garden? Like, our community garden nearby does that same composting thing. You can take your compost there and they will turn it, and take your food scraps there and they'll turn it into compost.
There's also a very big thing about eating food from your area. The things that are growing this season now is made to help you with the cold if it's winter. The things that are in your area, and especially honey. The honey should be from and specifically people who struggle with hay fever. The honey should be from the flowers in your area, and then it helps with your hay fever. But if it's flowers from a country on the other side of the planet, that's not going to help you at all, and you're not getting the nourishment you need because it's not from your environment. Julie, you had your hand up.
Sorry, I was just going to say, yesterday I was talking to my dad. He's been a gardener for many years, and he probably grew, I don't know, 85% of the food we ate as kids growing up. Like, he would butcher the meat, you know, we'd have a pig or a cow or whatever, and we'd all be involved in, you know, using the entire animal. And he grew amazing vegetables. And we were talking about the fact that, you know, at 85, he's still looking after all of these gardens. And he's really struggling because his health isn't good. And I said to him, you know, this is a perfect opportunity to invite others to come in and to start this thing of sharing and creating community gardens on people's private property, but with a neighbourhood focus. And that then means that we're not so isolated from each other. You know, the little kid down the street knows who lives in that house and that they can go in and help. You know? So it's just changing the whole way that we think and talk about it. So I'm really interested in that youth food movement that you mentioned, Charlotte. To see if there's some links with that I could develop for him. I haven't done much work with them in the last few years.
They started out in Sydney, but I believe there is still a Brisbane branch. Whereabouts are you, Julie? Adelaide?
Adelaide.
Yeah.
Anyway, I can find.
Have a look. YFM, Youth Food Movement. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Even local schools, Julie.
There's also a free food movement, which is all about growing fruit trees and vegetable plants in public spaces, and anyone can harvest. Anyone can have some of it. Natalie.
I think one of the big things moving into 5D living is eating much less and realizing the food program that we've all been sold about having 3 meals a day is a crock of shit. And how heavily that influences us, has our brains around that. Like, honestly, it's like so automated, because it was done from children. Even people who've lived off the land or, grown their own stuff, they still do 3 meals a day. It's like, we just don't need that. And I've spoken to several people lately who have friends who just stop eating, full stop. They just don't eat. And one woman hasn't eaten or drunk any fluids for 3 years. So it's like also expanding our awareness of what we actually do need, because we can go down the track of trying to replace what we're consuming now, but that's not the point. Because we can't.
Yeah, it's rejigging the whole paradigm of what food is. Yes, it's a source of nourishment, but it doesn't have to be to the same scale that we've been indoctrinated into. Like eating food as that source of nourishment has purpose, but we don't need to eat, in the context of going out to restaurants all the time. And I've just been reading Karen McMullen's book. And it actually talks on nourishment and how we've been diverted away from food as nourishment and eating when we need to eat because our body is asking for it. And we've been diverted down the path of agriculture and business, which has turned food into a business. And when we remember that that's what it is, we're not eating for nourishment anymore. We're eating for the senses, which is a form of gluttony that is an overload on our systems. Which is beautifully articulated, actually. And it was a great reminder today when I read it earlier today, just how coming back to the basics is the most, it's not that we shouldn't have flavour in our foods, but when we cook for nourishment, it actually flips everything on its head, because we're not cooking for taste. And that takes us down a path of, I want more product because I want this taste, which then forces us to go looking for things that aren't local to us because we want taste. So it's kind of curious how that can, when we scale it back and bring it back to nourishment, and what that might do.
2 things I want to say actually to that is, the one is there's incredible amount of food waste because of the agriculture industry. So, if we were actually using everything that is being produced, there would be a whole different story anyway. And the second thing is, as you change also what you eat, because a lot of people are eating a lot of sugary foods, a lot of pastry type foods. As soon as you change that, your taste anyway changes. I eat things that my parents wouldn't. They literally think that it isn't nice. Like there's definitely a different, you create a different taste or sensitivity to taste.
Yeah, your palate changes,
you eat raw, closer to source, more simple. I want to quickly show you the images, just because that one of them specifically is an answer to what you just said, Natalie, where a food forest shouldn't necessarily just be for our consumption, that it is actually creating a lot more biodiversity and supporting life in itself. So let's just see. All right, so these, I completely forgot about showing these. So this goes back to our role where we can, oh wait, screen share, right? Share. All right, can you see it?
Yeah.
So it's literally about restoring where there has been, and sometimes, like a lot of times, it is human inflicted damage, but sometimes there are damage to ecosystems that are natural, and that we can then, as humans, we can restore it if we feel called to do it. How do I go to the next one? Here we go. So this, so on the left, it was degraded by cattle. Then in the middle, that's actually orange peels from a big company, and they were convinced to just throw all their peels there instead of a landfill. And on the right, it regenerated the soil again, obviously over a very long time. Priscilla.
I actually recall reading this story recently, and it actually happened over a very long period of time, but I think it was a project that was put in place by some people who wanted to have a go at restoring, and they thought, well, let's see what we could do with these oranges. And the project got shelved, and the people had to walk away from the entire thing, and they came back 20 years later, and the change was dramatic. So it was kind of interesting how they started something and then had to step back, and it still took place anyway. Without any intervention, but it's just probably kind of even more potent, because it just goes to show what can happen when there isn't intervention in the way that we think it needs to be. It's not doesn't have to be a mind construct to create the intervention and to fix everything. You can actually, it's almost like let's just leave this thing alone and see what happens, and it actually will take care of itself. The planet knows what she's doing. We just got to get out of our own way.
She is incredible. Solid.
Just to follow on from that, what came in before was that one of the big changes that I think is really coming in, that's being called out and espoused by ecologists and environmentalists and, spiritual activists, people all around the world, is that concept of just simplifying. Like, we just need to consume less. And this is the drastic change that people really are not quite on board with yet, because it means totally simplifying your life, like eating less food. We've become so reliant on food as this source of energy, but there's actually energy all around us that we
not just food, even that's
just one example. Yeah, everything: magazines, clothes, cars. I was going to say even people, but I don't that.
Yeah, that's another conversation, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Close friends on a person. That's, everyone is different. But it's really simplifying our needs, and like coming back to basics, like you said, is something that's being called out around the world at the moment. Yeah.
Absolutely. So the next one, same, just shows you also what can be done. And then this specifically is a food forest. So this was done in 5 years.
Wow.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that's exciting, is that it doesn't need to take as much time as our mind and the stories that we've heard is going to take to actually create something amazing in the time frame to make real change in some areas and whatever you're going to do. That's exciting.
Exactly. Natalie.
It makes me wonder what's possible to plant at the Honeybee Hub. I know it's a rental, but there's plenty of trees that wouldn't require any maintenance that could be planted now. So have you guys thought about what I know you're planting food to eat now, but like longer term, have you talked about that?
Also trees.
We haven't really gone down. Well, we've got a few pieces in place, haven't we, Charlotte? You brought some natives from your mum, and they've gone into the ground yesterday.
the way to go. Like Janet said, like just natives, whatever is native to the land, that's what needs to come to the land. And that was Priscilla's intention from the original call out that she put there, was what's going to bring in the birds and the bees to pollinate, and what is endemic and native to the land already. So I bought some, I think they're bottle brushes from just like 3 little seedlings from my mum's house that have gone into the land, and then that one that you gifted, Natalie. So it's definitely that sort of thing, I think, is what will be going on here.
So we've got a little bit of work to do.
Yeah.
You know,
maybe it's something also that you can say when people are coming for fire circles or whatever, to bring a plant donation.
Yeah, that's a brilliant idea.
That's a great idea. Because what came to me about the fire circles very, very briefly today was this thing about, in what I was reading today in Karen's book, is about how we need to take the time to eat food that is nourishing, but it's also the time has been taken to be made to make the food, you know, nourishing, because it takes time to make nourishing food. And I realized that it's about calling in the people and having the food here and inviting them in to share the nourishment. And if they bring a plant or a gift that is for the garden as a little, you know, for coming along, that would be a beautiful exchange, you know. So who knows which way this can go, but it's a good idea to put out there.
Very cool.
It takes time, you know. Charlotte and I were talking about this yesterday. You know, it's like it takes actually really a year to understand the cycle of this environment, this specific spot, and how the light hits it and where the water flows and everything. So we're really learning. We're in that very early stages of learning.
That is going through a full cycle of seasons.
That's right.
Yeah.
So we're still looking at it all, going, oh, okay, what might and what may and may not work in these spots. So we're starting, but it's lots of things in pots right now while we look at the land.
And this land is pretty flush at the moment. We were talking to the owners about 40 years ago. He said there was very, very little here. There was much fewer trees here then than there are now. So it's kind of looking at what's actually needed. Is that needed? I mean, our little backyard could definitely do with some more plants and love and green and life, as far as I'm concerned. But in the area, it's actually growing pretty well. It's just a matter of stepping back and allowing it to flourish. There's little native seedlings that are popping up right near where we put in the ones that we put in the other day. So just kind of being, we don't need to interfere as much as we think we do, I think.
Yeah.
I believe.
Well, especially when you look at pesticides and things that you use. So I've got the image that I spoke of in front of you now, and it shows you all the different little insects, all the different types of life that are being supported by the food forest. And you can even look into a native forest, because I know you guys have in Australia beautiful forests, and you can go and look at this there as well. I've got I can't remember who it was, but I spoke to a guy who was growing food for him and his family. But he was literally saying that he is just growing as much as wants to grow, and he's just allowing the insects and the birds and even the wild animals who dig up the roots, allowing them to eat what they want. And there's still enough for him and his family. So yeah, it is literally then just allowing nature to do its thing instead of wanting to manage and control.
Yeah, we have an interesting thing here certainly in our backyard right now, is we have possums and we have turkeys, and yes, allowing them to be there is important, but they also have a habit of decimating all the work you've done to create the first stages. So it's like we're managing the early days where they dig holes and, you know, and the possums will eat everything. So
you need to protect it a little bit.
It's a nice
beginning.
Yeah, exactly. As we're establishing, it's an early stages kind of thing. So it's kind of funny just navigating that.
Yeah.
Like if it's something that you've created, you have to maintain that and keep it.
So I see we're running out of time a little bit. So I just want to show you guys what I mentioned earlier. So about looking with biomimicry, looking at nature and how she does things. So if you look at this little beetle, so a lot of beetles actually have water flow from their shield all the way towards their mouth, and that's how they drink water. They don't go to a little puddle and go and drink water. This is what they do.
Wow. That's cool.
So then I'll share the link into ecosystem for the actual article where I got this. So this is very much a project where and 2 slides on it shows another image of it, but where this will now collect water, and the water will be right there in the middle. I'm sure you've
seen pictures of these before.
Yes, amazing. And if
like water harvesters, they're amazing.
Yes, there's a lot of communities who have to travel or literally walk very far to get water. This brings their water hole much closer to them, and also much less polluted, or because typhoid, E. coli, they are issues in a lot of rivers. So this is a great way to get water from the air. And this is another design. And here's a couple of different examples. So at the top left is that one. I think it's the same project. And then, of course, I mean, the ones on the right just really appeals to me with the pyramid shape. And the one being upright, the other one being upside down.
Amazing. Wow.
And then I want to show you this. We will, in future eco chatters, we'll talk a lot more, because each of these things are things that we should be talking about, but they each can be unpacked a little bit more. Look at projects that are being done, look at how we can apply it to our own lives. Because this now is specifically for towns, but we can start literally in our own house, and how to use things that are local, how to be more adaptable. Because I think a lot of the times we create suffering for ourselves and struggles because we're not adaptable enough. Waste should be a resource. So one of the things that this project, BioWise, specifically has been sharing, or the idea she's been sharing, is, and I think it might be in Sweden that they're doing it, they take the coffee grounds, and instead of just putting that into compost, they grow oyster mushrooms from it. And then the oyster mushrooms are then sold to a close by restaurant. And the coffee grounds that then have spores from the mushrooms are actually richer for the compost again. And then they use that compost to grow coffee.
Cool.
So you create this cycle, this closed loop. And that's from using something that's seen as waste, the coffee grounds. So we'll have a look at this in future ones. And then, of course, all of you can put extra ideas, suggestions, questions into the events for it, or just on the main post. Is there anything you want to add still? Add, ask, share.
Not right now. I feel like
some of these
there's
images,
so much to...
Janet, in the group, yeah, and that the image with the ecosystem, all the different animals and stuff, yeah.
Did you have your hand up, Charlotte?
Yeah, I was just going to say I really liked that question that you like that we mentioned at the beginning about what we're doing with our cycle for menstruation and how we're managing that. That was really cool, like just to share what we are actually doing, like what are we putting into place and bringing into this physical right now that's working for us, like just to keep sharing those ideas and to get some action behind it, I guess, to actually know what are we doing, how can we share, and then to share that. I feel like that's really important to come back to actually the employment of all these amazing ideas.
So can I ask each of us to share one thing that you will be doing in the next month, and it can be something about food, water, or your role. It could be something about your cycle, your menstruation. It can be anything that you feel is an actionable step, and it can be really small, it can be big. My action would be in the next 2 days to create art with the waste that we produced this week that I can then gift to our host.
Cool.
Natalie, your hand was up.
Also something I've just started doing. I don't know how long this has been going in Alice Springs in particular, but Coles and Woolworths recycle all soft plastics. And so I've just been collecting those, and my God, the amount is astounding. And, I'm eating mostly fresh foods. So like the average person would be so much worse with what they collect. It's amazing to see what you go through. And I wish I'd done this years ago but they didn't have it then. But also I'm also collecting, because we don't have recycling around here, unless you take them to the plant. So I'm just collecting all the bottles and stuff and giving them to Tracy, who then goes and cashes them in, because it's 10 cents a bottle here in NT. So she's very happy because she gets the extra money, and I'm happy because at least it's not going to landfill.
Nice. 30.
So here's my soft plastic bag.
Wow.
Which I only started doing when Nat and Priscilla came to stay, because I didn't even know it existed before that. But, and so that's my, I don't know, probably my third bag, I guess. And I'm jamming it pretty full in there and it doesn't smell because it's all just, bags.
Same plastic, yeah.
Really anything smelly in there. However, I do have to keep going through our bin regularly and pulling out all of the stuff that Michael keeps shoving in. And I'm doing it in front of him, and he say, "Where's that going?" And I said, "In the soft plastics bag." So he's seeing me do it. One day it'll make impact somewhere, hopefully. And if not, I just have to keep digging through the bin. Other than that, I hope that in the next week or so, I might have something that I can harvest out of my little garden that I planted to go. There's supposed to be some little carrots due. I'm like a little bit excited and scared and apprehensive to pull one out and see whether it's actually grown. It's all like it's up this high and it looks really healthy on top, and the snow peas are starting to get their little tendrils and they're growing quite big. So that's really cool to see that that's actually worked. They're growing, and the next step is to actually get something out of it I can eat.
Very cool.
We've got a couple of things, haven't we, Charlotte, if we're talking about a household? So I'll let Charlotte, do you want to go first or shall I?
You're talking.
Okay. So the things that we've noticed and what we do is we've yet to actually take our plastics bag up to the supermarket, but it is getting pretty full, which is good. But it's what has been interesting is that Charlotte and we compost all of our fruit and vegetables, all our food scraps, except the meat ones, of course, and that's rarely in the house anyway. So because I'm the meat eater and Charlotte's vegan, so it's only me, and I eat maybe meat once or twice in a fortnight, maybe, in the house. It's like in waves. Anyway, long story short, we've noticed that the garbage, the collection day for Sunday is like, our household bin is probably not even a third full, because we're recycling the plastics and only throwing out exactly what is truly can't be put anywhere else except in that bin. I came to that realization that I don't have to empty the bin every Sunday just to take a bag out. It's like I'm going to wait until it's really full before I actually take it out to the house, out to the garbage collection. And there's something else that a few things we've just done the big planting yesterday. We planted a whole pile of rocket seeds, so we'll see what happens there. But I've got passion fruit growing on the down on the fence to see, and that's actually starting to really take off, which has been fantastic. And something that Charlotte has taken to doing, I used to do this in a house that I used to live in years ago, but have not been able to do since I've stopped bleeding. But we have actually used Charlotte's blood in our fertilizing days, and she has a beautiful rhyme that she taught me.
The words from Jodie, so the song that I put up. But what's your one thing, Priscilla? What's your one thing that you're going to do?
My one thing. The one thing. I know, it's all over the place. But no, I'm just, there's a whole pile of things that we're doing, and it's like an ongoing process. So I think the one thing is just staying on track with this process that we started about keeping our bins.
Well, what about the plant donation for the fire circles?
Yeah, I'll do that. Well, actually, I think, plant donation or just creating the food. I'm going to create a dish for people to eat when they come to visit. I think that's the key one. So, all right. So I digressed. Oh well.
Sorry, can I talk now? I just wanted to say I too have noticed the downsizing of waste, and the sometimes you put the bin out and you go, I just don't even need to put that out. Which is great, because I'm using a bar for shampoo, so I don't have those big plastic containers anymore, because that just horrifies me. And yes, we're planting bits of our garden up, so that's going to be this coming week, is putting in some veggies into the bits we've dug over the last couple of weeks. So yeah, it will be great.
Nice. And Charlotte, I suppose you already doing so much.
Well, I think the one thing that I'm going to get on top of is getting these garden beds built. I have a friend who is super handy and can build things amazingly. And we've talked about building some garden beds, some raised garden beds to go in the backyard. So getting at least one of those, if we can do this in the next month, that's going to be my one thing.
Nice.
Yeah.
And so we didn't speak about it this time, but how many of you are harvesting rainwater? Have you got a water tank?
I've got 5.
Nice.
Wow.
Yeah, the guy who had this property before us used to actually sell the rainwater. We aren't doing that, but we're certainly harvesting way more than we need.
That's stunning.
And being very careful about water consumption, which is interesting, being in a really, a much higher rainfall area than Alice Springs, of course. But even here, we had 6 months with no rain. Things are changing on the planet. Yeah. Lots of humidity in the air, days of 85% humidity, but no rain.
So that's all for today. There is lots for us to speak about next time. Definitely a lot.
Janet.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for joining.
It's been fantastic. Thank you.
That's great.
Look forward to the next one.
Yeah.
Yes, me too. Enjoy the rest of your day.
All right.
All right. Bye.
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 Bye.